What are the next steps now to keep both the federal government and the state on track? Do you see any kind of red flags or yellow warning signs or anything like that?
I see both yellow and red flags, but I think to explain that, let me go back through some of the history, which you here know better than I probably know. But if you look at 2000 through 2008, frankly, the Everglades Restoration Task Force, which I head, really was doing some things, but not very many projects were being moved forward. When I became Secretary of Interior, I agreed that it would be one of the highest priorities for me. The President directed me to do that. He had said that it was important for him, it was important for me. So I spent a lot of my time on it. This is my 7th, 8th, or 9th visit just to the Everglades alone during the time that I've been Secretary. With Charlie Crist as governor, we worked very closely with him during these first 3 years to try to make sure that the United States and the state of Florida were both putting all of their available resources and all their energy into fixes for the Everglades. And we did a number of different things with Governor Crist. Governor Scott comes in. I've said this before, I think, in the editorial board meeting room, that I wasn't sure. There's a big question mark. And it was because for a long period of time there wasn't much attention that it seemed that his administration was really given to the Everglades. And then the water quality issue heated up, and Administrator Jackson worked closely with the state of Florida, and they came up with this agreement. It's a $900 million agreement in investment in the Everglades on water quality, but it will be spread out over a number of years. And so I always worry that when you have future commitments that have been made, that they will not be lived up to, even though this one is enforceable by the hammer of the court of law, the decree that will be entered. But you have to have a conservation commitment in order to fund conservation in the United States. And yellow, and perhaps I guess it's a red flag that I would raise today, is that generally the conservation programs that have been put on the table today, especially by the United States Congress and the House Republicans, are frankly a U-turn and a 50-year setback in conservation funding for America. The Land and Water Conservation Fund is almost zeroed out. The National American Wetlands Conservation Act is almost zeroed out. And most of the conservation streams that we have coming in the House Appropriations Bill, which is now on the floor of the House, they basically have zeroed them out. If you look at our wildlife refuges, including the Wakahatchee Wildlife Refuge, the cuts that are proposed in that budget are as high as 20 to 22%. So that will mean the shutting down of some of the wildlife refuges around the country. So to me, that is a huge U-turn on the commitment that has been made for conservation that we have fought for the last 4 years. I hope that better minds will prevail. But that's one of the big issues that will be fought out in the months ahead as we start dealing with the sequester and as we start dealing with the deficit issues. And so how the federal government balances its budget.
Is that the Ryan plan pretty much when you're talking about? Okay.
Pretty much the Ryan plan, but this is a this bill has already passed.
Right.
It's a bill that funds the Interior Department, and it passed out of committee on a party line vote, and it's on the floor of the Senate. Last year, when the same thing happened, the conservation organizations around the country organized themselves, some 1,100 organizations, to basically make the case to House Republicans and Senate Republicans that they could not decimate conservation. And the main argument that they made, Miriam, was that there are about 9 million jobs a year that are created through conservation and preservation around the country. If you look at outdoor recreation, boaters, rafters, kayakers, hikers, hunters, anglers, they're a huge part of our economy. My work on tourism, we have a report from the Jobs Council that says that with our efforts to push tourism, that we can create another 2.1 to 3.3 million jobs over the next 10 years. Well, part of what we do with tourism is we have these great places for people to come and see, like the Everglades here in America. So when you short conservation, you're also shorting the economy. And I think our friends in conservation in the Teddy Roosevelt tradition have tried to make that point very strongly to the United States House of Representatives. I hope they hear it. They haven't heard it yet, but I hope they hear it. Here in Florida, I don't know. I mean, you all have been going through also dealing with
our water management districts. I don't have to tell you. I mean, they to a certain degree. Is there any other major project that you're looking forward to in if you're returning in the next 4 years? What would be for Florida? Is this continuing on the Everglades? Is there anything else that's key to under the Interior Department's realm?
Absolutely. As the chair of the Everglades Task Force, we brought all the United States agencies together several months ago and started a very expedited process to come up with the next set of projects under the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. And so work, in those kinds of undertakings, which are led by the Army Corps of Engineers, sometimes will take 5-10 years because of the commitment of Assistant Secretary Darcy and the push of all of us. We're going to get it done in record time, and what that will do is we'll get it done probably in 18 months, and then some projects will be identified even before then, but there will be a series of the next generation of Everglades restoration projects that will be identified in that plan.
Oh, okay. Have you met the governor? Have you had some conversations directly with the governor, or has it mostly been with his officials at the environmental level on any of these issues? I know in the Everglades he seems to have turned a bit of a corner a few months ago when he started to recognize his poll numbers were in the tank. So
he was inaugurated what year?
No, he was inaugurated, was it January of this year?
Oh, last year.
Just last year,
Of last
2011.
2010.
Okay.
So 2011.
Elected in 2010, November.
Right.
Yeah, so it's been 18 months, about 18 months.
And I would tell him this if he were sitting in the room. I would just say, you remember our history. February of that year, right after his inauguration, I called him and I said, the Everglades are very important, and it's important you continue the commitment of Florida and the relationship that we had with Governor Christ. We didn't know much about the Everglades at the time, and frankly, we hadn't seen anything coming out of his office, and we hadn't seen any conversation about it in the campaign. And he said, well, let me see what I can do, but he just kind of left it at that. I was worried, and as I would come down, I would speak to people about the Everglades, that there wasn't much attention that was being paid there. And then I don't know what happened in his mind or in his world, but at one point in time he said, he called, he said, maybe we can try to do something on this, on water quality. And so we've had some meetings with him on that. Lisa Jackson had the lead role on it. But I do think that this agreement on water quality isn't everything that it could be. But it's a step in the right direction, but it's only a piece of it. I mean, if you think about the major commitment that has to be made to Everglades restoration, the water quality piece of it is an important piece. The investments may need to be larger, and there's other conservation initiatives that are going to be essential as well. So anyway, I look at him in terms of this very specific issue, and I say what was silenced at the beginning turned out to be embracing of the Everglades. We're still watchful, hoping that he embraces it with the same kind of passion that we bring to the Everglades.
Mm-hmm. As important as the Everglades are, the Gulf is also a lot of this state's bread and butter. 2 years out from the BP oil spill, what's your assessment of how the Gulf itself, the waters, have recovered?
I think the Gulf is recovering, and I think it's in good shape. I think the economics of the Gulf are back and they're good. After the huge scare and nightmare that started on April 2010, the Gulf is in much better shape. I will say that there is a historic opportunity, and Senator Bill Nelson has been a key leader in fighting for the Restore Act, which just passed the Congress and was signed by the President. And under that act, the civil penalties that will be paid by BP, as well as the other responsible parties, will have to be spent on ecological restoration. 80% of the monies will have to be spent to do that. And so I am hopeful that we'll be able to make some lemon out of the lemonade, if you will, in the Gulf. That its huge crises, which was one of the most significant national crises that the nation has faced, and which I was very involved in dealing with the crisis and its aftermath, that we'll be able to launch a Gulf Coast restoration effort that will be the kind of restoration effort that we've had going on in the Everglades. And I think there are a lot of parallels. I mean, I think when you look at the Everglades today, it is without a doubt the largest environmental restoration project in the world. And the Gulf of Mexico and the Mississippi River and the marshlands off the Mississippi, the whole Delta area, they have been a very degraded ecosystem for many, many decades. And so there is an opportunity here in what will be a multi-billion-dollar investment to be able to bring about some long-term and permanent restoration for the Gulf of Mexico. Because of Florida's connection to the Gulf, and because of the formulas that are set up in the Restore Act, I expect that there will be significant benefits to Florida from those monies. Several things need to happen before that occurs. One is we have to figure out what ultimately BP and the responsible parties are going to put into the pot. That may happen soon. It may take a long time for that to finally get resolved in the courts. We don't know. The second thing is that the Federal State Commission will have to deliver a plan on Gulf Coast restoration by the end of this year. And so the components of that plan, we'll have to figure out what goes into that plan. And each of the states has a part of the money that will come to them. And so each of the states is going to have to come up with its own plan. I would hope that for the state of Florida, the state of Florida will decide how the money will be used within the constraints of the federal law. And the constraint is that they have to be used for at least 80% for ecosystem restoration. But I would hope that they can find ways of not only restoration in the important areas of the Gulf, but some of those areas that have a nexus also to the Everglades.
Obviously, Florida has historically been against it. Right now, we're not. I think our governor has been more open to it, and Republicans seem to think that oil is now going to be the answer to
So
our.
does Cuba.
Yeah, so does Cuba. Don't take me there. But in fact, for oil protection, as far as any new drilling, not drilling per se, but evaluation of potential drilling sites, some of those sites were approved through the Obama administration. Has anything new happened since then? Then came the BP oil spill, so that sort of put where's our policy right now as far as drilling in the Gulf?
We published a 5-year plan for all of America's oceans and oil and gas at the end of June.
End of June.
And so that is our formal plan in terms of how we intend to move forward with oil and gas development in the oceans. And there is a focus on the Gulf of Mexico in the central and western Gulf. And so between 2012 and 2017, we have multiple lease sales that are scheduled for the Gulf of Mexico. And we do it for a number of different reasons. One is there is general support from many states for oil and gas production from those Gulf states. Number two, there is we have more geological information on the oil and gas reserves in the Gulf of Mexico than anywhere else in the world. Number three, we have huge infrastructure that already serves the Gulf of Mexico, from pipelines to the whole industry that is so fed by the 30% of the nation's oil and gas that comes from the Gulf of Mexico. So we are looking forward to a very robust and safe production of oil and gas from the Gulf. We also recognize that the historic overhaul that we have made to ensure that oil and gas exploration development occurs safely, that those safeguards need to be put into place. And so one thing that will happen here in the next several weeks will be one of the things that came out of the our efforts to try to make it safer and to make sure that we were preventing the kind of crises that we had in the BP oil spill, is we required companies to create these organizations to be able to quickly respond to any kind of incident in the Gulf. So there are two organizations, they're multi-billion-dollar organizations, the Marine Well Containment Corporation, another one called Helix, and they have all of the capacity now to be able to respond to something like a Macondo well, from capping stacks to ships to whole system and personnel to be able to quickly come in and address the issue. We won't issue a permit in the Gulf of Mexico unless the permittee has agreed to be a part of those organizations and access all those facilities. So, on the oil and gas side, what I would say is, 2 years and several months after the oil spill, the United States is in a much better position than it was before the oil spill in terms of assuring safe and responsible development of oil and gas.